Hi, everyone, and thanks for being here with us. My name's Carolina Zapata. I am the creator of Carolina Wellness, and I am also the lead health coach for Carolina Wellness. And we specialize in helping people gain the skills and confidence to live happy, healthier lives. And today I'm joined by Zach Pyne, a licensed psychotherapist. Thanks for being here, Zach.
Thanks for having me, Carolina. Happy to be here.
Great. Yeah, we appreciate your time. I wanted to have you on the call because today we're going to be talking about mindful drinking and the benefits of dry January and beyond, right? Like this is just kind of to get us started thinking about how to improve your relationship with alcohol. And certainly this can happen any time of the year. But this talk is really for anyone who is wondering how to improve their relationship with alcohol, and even just, I guess, in the vein of mindfulness, starting to think about their relationship with alcohol and question it and really wonder what they're getting out of it and what the benefits might be of taking a break, either short term or even more long term. So yeah, with that, I would love to hear, Zach, like what your background is and what you specialize in, and share that with the audience.
Sure. So I am, as Carolina said, a licensed professional counselor in Washington, D.C. I've been licensed in the District of Columbia for the past 6 years. I've spent 4 of the past 6 years working at an intensive outpatient program for substance abuse issues. So I was facilitating group therapy every day, in addition to doing like individual and family therapy as part of the therapy program, as part of the treatment there. For the past 2 years, I've also been in private practice, and that's what I do full time now, where I continue to help people who have substance use issues, as well as do some of the deeper work. You know, when you stop drinking, oftentimes you become more aware of maybe some dissatisfaction in other areas of your life. So I work with people around improving the quality of their relationships so they get more of what they want in their relationships, and more of what they want in life. I also help people manage, past experiences that maybe they haven't really explored before, or want to explore again, as well as managing kind of present issues like anxiety and depression.
Got it. Thank you for explaining that. And I guess I would like to start with just thinking about dry January and some of the benefits. I know that like online, there's a lot of information out there, but it is hard to tell whether or not it makes sense to take a break or if it's just a trend, that sort of thing. And if you are wanting to take a break, what's the most effective way to do it? So, in your professional opinion, does it make sense to do a dry January, and what would be the benefits that you see?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of benefits from something like a dry January. I think just the practice of dry January makes a lot of sense because it's something that is known in our culture. So there are other people doing it, and I think it's a time when people are thinking about changing their relationship with drinking. Particularly after the holiday season, and as we start a new year, it's a change that is on people's minds, and this is a time when people might be doing a dry January or talking about it. I think there are a lot of benefits that come from taking a break from drinking. I hear people talk about just this increased mental clarity where they can think clearly, they have an easier time focusing, they feel more productive, they wake up in the morning feeling more energized. That could be because just they're sleeping better. Alcohol can really keep you from getting into some of the deeper, more restorative phases of sleep that come kind of later on. And so they wake up in the morning feeling invigorated and ready to seize the day more often. And those sort of benefits are common enough that 12-step community talks about a pink cloud that usually people experience when they stop drinking. So definitely something to look forward to if you're considering a dry January.
And so I think you had mentioned this to me before, but what is it about, you had recommended 30 days and you said 30 days might be a good amount of time for people to take a break. What is it about 30 days that would be a good amount of time?
Yeah, I think 30 days, it's a nice even number. It's about a month. And so I think that just makes it easier for people to plan around, easier for people to conceptualize mentally.
Mm-hmm.
I think 30 days is enough of a break from alcohol to really experience some of the physical benefits, that improved mental clarity, that improved overall sense of well-being that I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a good amount of time for some of the routines that you might get into in place of drinking to feel more comfortable. That's something that usually takes about 3 weeks to a month to take place. And 30 days can be a good way to get a better baseline about, just how you feel without alcohol in your
Mm-hmm.
life. It tends to be enough of amount of time for that to really happen and for you to become more aware of maybe some things that the alcohol was helping you to manage in terms of your emotional experience. So it's a good goal to shoot for. Helps build some awareness as well as to kind of get more comfortable in a routine of not drinking.
Got it. And so you just mentioned awareness. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. I know that from a coaching perspective, I think it's really important to have people develop self-awareness and use self-awareness as a tool for themselves. They may or may not always have professional help, but I think that the more awareness that they have, the more they can, serve themselves and, set goals for themselves and determine how they want to step forward. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how folks can develop that awareness and what it means.
Yeah, I think one way that dry January or taking a break from drinking could be really meaningful is, gives you an opportunity to have that clarity. And if you apply it to your life to kind of build some of that awareness and reflect on how you're doing with, a clear head,
Hmm.
right? It can help you just to get in the habit and reflecting. It can give time for that.
Mm-hmm.
It can give space for you just to kind of, now that you're not drinking, just to sit down and be present in your day-to-day experience more and to recognize like, hey, this relationship I have with my partner is great, but there's something that I've been thinking about for a while that I haven't asked for, and this might be a good opportunity for me to do that. Kind of helps make you more aware of things maybe you've been putting to the side, and it can give space for you to really kind of engage in some of the practical aspects of awareness. So, kind of sitting down in the same space and just telling yourself, okay, this is the time I'm going to use to reflect in a way that's kind of what therapy is, right? You go to this place and you sit with this person and they ask you questions that get you to think more deeply about your experience. Can be done with a therapist or it can be done with a family member or a friend, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But just an opportunity for you to practice that. Now that you're not drinking, you'll have more time and to really have a meaningful experience. I think digging into reflecting in that way is going to make a dry January very meaningful.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Seems like you would have some extra time there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, like I said, just getting in the habit of doing that for a lot of people is going to be something new. It's something that I don't think many people spend a lot of time reflecting on. And I think it can really make you more aware of some things that you might want to change in your life. So that way you can make those changes and feel more satisfied, more fulfilled.
Great. So for some folks, they may be thinking, well, you know, I don't think my life is that bad. Do I really need, I don't really think I have any issues. There's not that much I need to work on, that sort of thing. Um, and there's a couple things to unpack there. One of them could be, I think our society makes it difficult to know if your relationship with alcohol is normal or not.
Mhm.
And I can give you a personal example. A personal example would be, I worked previously in an industry where drinking was normalized. So it was just kind of part of the job, happy hour here and, drinks with clients there. And sometimes it would kind of escalate. And every once in a while I would think, like, is this normal? But, I don't want to get too deep into like my personal example, but I just mean, I think in general, the environment plays a role, and also just kind of societal norms play a role. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on a person to person level. How do you determine what's normal for you, or how do you get that understanding of like that aha moment where you're like, you know what, this is starting to be problematic for me?
Mhm. Yeah, I think I appreciate, Carolina, you sharing that personal example. I think I've been, living in DC for the past 6 years, and this is definitely a drinking town, so I'm familiar with the cultural aspects of happy hour after work and networking and socializing happening kind of at a bar or in a place where alcohol is definitely present. And I think you're absolutely right that that can make it hard to know what is normal in terms of drinking behavior. I think the cultural aspect, as well as, we have these companies out there who are trying to sell alcohol and promote it, and those are pretty common to see commercials for that, as well as just being out in a city like Washington. You see all the cafes, or you did before the coronavirus, and so you'd see people out drinking very often. So it's definitely something that's normalized here.
Yeah.
And I think when people think about what is problem drinking, that there's usually a person that comes to mind, or an example that maybe we've seen in the media that we can think of and compare our drinking to that and say, hey, it's not so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so for me, in my work as a substance abuse therapist, I look at the definition that the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism has come up with through their research, just as part of what low risk drinking looks like. And so for men, I look at the definition: 14 or fewer drinks in a week, 4 or fewer drinks in a given day. That's low risk drinking for men. For women, 7 or fewer drinks in a week, 3 or fewer drinks in a given day. That's low risk drinking for women. So that, I think, is a good standard to compare your own
Mm-hmm.
drinking behavior to, and recognizing that if you're drinking more frequently or greater volumes than that, that the likelihood of there being a consequence, whether that's, like a social consequence in terms of your relationships, where maybe you said something that you shouldn't, you feel embarrassed about that, or a work consequence where your performance might be a little lower than what you're capable of, or a legal consequence, those are going to be more likely if you're drinking more than that. It's going to take more of a physical toll on your body as well. So health is also something to consider there.
Yeah, thanks for that. So is that, I guess, once maybe some of these behaviors come into play and people gain self-awareness around them, is that how people end up coming to you? Or what is common for people to say to you once they're coming to your office? It seems very brave for someone to like come forth and say, I might have an issue, but I'm not sure.
Mhm.
We've come a long way in terms of people asking for help, but there's still a slight stigma around that. And there's a lot of vulnerability involved where, they just have to open up to you in order to even decide to come into your office.
Yeah, I like that you talked about the courage, because that's something that I always try to point out. It's always something I try to accentuate and make a big deal out of when somebody comes to meet with me the first time, because it does take courage to do that. You're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. There's a lot of stigma in our society, particularly as it comes to problematic drinking. And I think taking a look at that and acknowledging, hey, this might be a problem for me, takes a lot of vulnerability. Um, when I was working at the clinic, the intensive outpatient program that I worked for, I was working with individuals who had moderate to severe alcohol use disorder. So they met a certain number of criteria in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic um, something or other. I can't remember that. Diagnostic and Statistics Manual of Psychiatric Disorders, something like that. But that's kind of what people use to make those sort of diagnoses, and that's what we use to diagnose people as being appropriate for our program. And so usually they were either aware that, hey, this has been a problem for me, I've tried to do something about it and I haven't been successful. But there were a good number of people who were there because, you know, their employer told them to be there, or they had to do a program like that. Family members, you know, kind of put their foot down and said, this is something that you really need to address if we're going to continue to have a relationship. And that tends to be this true for people who find me in private practice. A lot of people are referred to me from the outpatient program I used to work at. People find me online. They come in saying, I've tried to quit drinking. I know drinking's a problem. I just can't seem to get it. Or, you know, a friend or loved one has said to them, look, this is really a problem for you. I don't like who you are when you drink. And so they're coming in, maybe this is something I need to take a look at. You know, maybe I do have a problem. And so in both cases, they're kind of at the start of their journey, looking to really deepen their awareness about their relationship and what motivates them to drink, particularly what continues to motivate them to drink after there have been some problems.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the work that I help people do in therapy.
Which is amazing work, by the way. And sometimes you just do things habitually. I'm sure, you know, you just kind of are going through the motions of doing them, and you don't even stop to think, well, what am I getting out of this? I think that goes for alcohol and lots of other things where, you know, every once in a while it's nice to hit that pause button like Dry January and be like, what am I actually getting from alcohol or drinking or what have you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part of my work is just helping people slow down and hit the pause button, like you said, to really uncover the thought patterns that lead them towards taking that drink, which over time become very unconscious and habitual, like you're saying. But if you can pause, then there's a good chance you can be more conscious about what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think particularly, you know, when I was in the group setting and just hearing from a lot of people who were trying to stay abstinent, being able to share those thought patterns with each other, sometimes hearing somebody just say what they're thinking kind of has a little light bulb go off in your head, and you kind of recognize, oh, I've been thinking the same thing. And so it can be very helpful to do this with somebody else. And that's why I really like the idea of a dry January, where you can probably find other people who are attempting it, or at least be able to start talking about our drinking behavior, which is not really something that happens other parts of the year.
Yeah. I would love to talk to you about resources and support, but I'm going to, if that's okay with you, I'm going to put a pin in it and return to it. Before we get to that, I wanted to talk to you about a question that was submitted to me. So I have kind of my own thoughts and opinions, but I'd love to hear what yours are. This particular person describes their relationship with drinking in a way that is a negative cycle, right? So for them, they describe it as not wanting to drink, and so they'll abstain from it for a while and end up going back to drinking and then kind of feeling guilty about it. They also talk about it in terms of feeling like it feels overwhelming for them to cut it out completely versus trying to moderate, because they feel like they would have to change their entire life. And so certainly that feels overwhelming. And my thoughts were that perhaps, this has been something that's been, as an adult, you could end up drinking for many, many years, right? And so you kind of have these rituals that are associated with drinking, and you have friends that you drink with, and so there's these different ties. And maybe over time you kind of build this identity for yourself where you're like, I drink, and even maybe this cycle becomes part of your identity. So I wanted to bring that up and see what your thoughts were on that, and how you help people break free from this cycle if that's what they wish to do.
Yeah, I think the person who reached out to you did a great job kind of describing the cycle, as they put it, that so many people experience. This is something I'm very familiar with just in my work, both at the clinic and in private practice, around helping people who wanted to break that cycle. Because I think, what we're talking about is the cycle of addiction right there, that, we are continuing to do behaviors that we don't want to be doing, and that makes us feel ashamed of our own powerlessness, right? We should be able to deal with this stuff on our own. Why can't I just get it? I come looking for support just so you can tell me the right thing to make it click in my head so I can be fixed. And unfortunately, that's not always how this works, right? I think I would say to that person who's worried about, my whole lifestyle has to change, and it's scary. It is scary, and to a certain extent, it's very true. A lot of aspects of your life will change if you were to cut alcohol out of it. Just alcohol being so prevalent in the way we connect, the way we socialize. There's almost a way that we have to relearn how to do that without alcohol. The good news there, because I can imagine that being very scary. The good news is that you can do it. A lot of people have done it. You can be successful. You're probably more capable than you acknowledge or can recognize at this moment in time. There are some parts of your life that you're going to have to let go of. And I think for this to really stick, those are parts of your life that it helps to grieve. I think grief is a very complicated experience, and it helps to have somebody to kind of hold your hand during it and kind of walk you through what's going on, because that grieving process often leads people back to continuing the cycle, to picking up that drink again, because I don't like the way I feel right now. And I don't have to feel this if I don't want to. But I think there's a lot that you can learn about yourself, and there's a lot that you can recognize about what you want for yourself if you are able to kind of build a tolerance of that distress. Sitting with some uncomfortable emotions like sadness or loneliness, anger. Those are common emotions I hear people dealing with now during the quarantine. And I think being able to sit with those and just acknowledge, like, yeah, I have these emotions, and that's okay. And I can choose how I want to express those emotions. I think there's a lot that can be gained. And, when you're at the start of the journey, it's hard to appreciate kind of where you might end up. And it's easier to just feel that and to think about all the things you're going to lose. And particularly if you haven't experienced some of this stuff yet, if you haven't had a great relationship with yourself, if you don't feel like you have a lot of self-esteem, if the quality of your relationships has always left something to be desired, it's hard to imagine how those things could get better, and what those things being better, what that's going to mean for you and your own well-being and your own health. Yeah.
That's so helpful. And I do think it's powerful to acknowledge that you are maybe grieving an old version of you, or, an old lifestyle. But then I'm sure that once you get to a certain point, you can then be excited and look forward to all the new things that you're going to gain in your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've found that people who are successful in kind of making that commitment and kind of sticking with it are able to do both. They're able to have their feelings as it relates to the losses, right? The loss as you put it, the loss of identity. This is what I do, the loss of maybe relationships that come as a result of being able to socialize over alcohol. And they can also acknowledge that they might have new relationships, or there might be a new level of emotional depth and connection that comes from their relationships when alcohol isn't a part of it. And they could find out that their friends liked them for them the whole time, and it wasn't just because they drank together. Right? There are a lot
Yeah.
of things you can learn and find out, and there are a lot of things that you can add to your life. Um, and it's hard to explain that to people that, when you're a few months down the road, you're not going to be the same. You're not going to feel the same that you do now.
Yeah. Well, it's unfamiliar. And,
Absolutely.
as human beings, we're not great with change. So baby steps, I suppose. But
Yes.
yeah. So, in this particular example, we're talking about, I think, somebody that wants to make a permanent change and, do beyond the short break. They want kind of something more long term. But I guess if we could just touch on, is it easier for folks to try to moderate and then step into abstinence, or is it easier to step into abstinence and then see how you feel?
I would recommend that, I think that is a great question. I would recommend that people take the step into abstinence for, a certain amount of time. Like I said before, part of what makes 30 days appealing is that it's a round number. It's, 1 month. I can start this month, and I know at the end of this month I can change my behavior if I want.
Mm-hmm.
But I think giving yourself time, giving your body a chance to kind of start healing itself and returning to a state of balance that alcohol can disrupt to a certain degree,
Mm-hmm.
is going to be helpful. Giving yourself a chance just to recharge, I think, is what a lot of people are looking for in a dry January, just a chance to get back to a level of quote unquote normal. And I think giving yourself a chance to do that, as opposed to trying to moderate your drinking, is going to, allow you to feel better. Like I said before, it's going to help some of those routines that you might pick up in absence of drinking to feel a little more comfortable. Um, and it's going to give you the clarity of mind to make an informed decision, just to be very intentional about the relationship that you want to have. Some people might go for a month and they realize this was pretty easy. I could probably do another month, and maybe they just keep going that way.
Mm-hmm.
In 12-step communities, they talk about that one day at a time. And that's a lot of what it is. It's like, well, today I don't need to pick up a drink. And so they just add a day by day. And then before you know it, I was at a meeting before and someone had 20 years of sobriety. So they do it one day at a time like that. But for some people, they know kind of going in, I want to return to drinking in some capacity. And so I think taking a break gives you a chance to probably feel your best and to get at a baseline of what your life could be without drinking, so you can introduce alcohol in a way that you feel comfortable with, in a way that kind of allows some of those benefits of not drinking to continue.
Yeah, I think that's spot on too. I believe it's easier to add on new habits than to concentrate on the fact that you're eliminating something from your life, right? Like that positive spin, giving yourself the opportunity and time to create different new things that you enjoy. And you might realize that you enjoy them more than drinking. So
Mhm.
that then becomes your new pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So in terms of, like, I don't want to make it a gender thing at all, but I think it is important to kind of think about some of the differences in maybe gender and how they end up having a specific relationship with alcohol. Specifically, I'm thinking about, like, the CDC talks about how men are more likely to binge drink than women, and also they're historically have had higher alcoholism rates. Do you think that this is, I mean, that's a generalization, but why do you think that is? And is there anything specific that you think makes somebody more susceptible to substance abuse than somebody else?
Well, if I take the second part of that first, more susceptible to alcohol abuse, I think particularly with alcohol, there is definitely a genetic component in that there's good research that suggests that alcoholism is passed down through families. And so just an acknowledgement of that, kind of knowing family history can be really helpful when someone is looking at the relationship they want to have with alcohol. Uh, the first part, why does it look different in different genders? I think has a lot to do with how genders are socialized in our society. I think the messages given to men and to women about how to handle their emotions and is it okay to have emotions and can I be sharing my emotions? I think those are different. I think for men, the message is that emotional vulnerability is not masculine. You know, masculinity is kind of defined by being able to have these feelings and to manage them independently on your own. And I think for women, they're given messages that encourage them to be vulnerable and encourage them to form intimate relationships and to develop the skills that it requires to maintain those intimate relationships. And so I think, you know, and there's also, in addition to some of the research you were mentioning before, there's good research that suggests that women are more likely than men to seek treatment when they have an issue. Um, I think there's a lot of research in depression that suggests that women are twice as likely to get diagnosed with depression as men. And the one theory behind that is that men might similarly be depressed as women, but they just won't acknowledge it. They don't seek help and they don't talk about it. And I think part of that is because the way men do masculinity is by trying to deal with their emotional problems on their own. And I think substance abuse is one way they try to take care of themselves, right? It doesn't start out being abuse. They use the substance because it kind of helps manage maybe some of the difficult emotions that they may be having. And then over time, it becomes habitual and it starts having a negative impact. I think the same can be true for women. You know, they pick up a substance because it helps them to take care of themselves. Uh, and the similar patterns can play out in both genders. But I do think that women are able to, given messages that, you know, it's okay for them to ask for help, and they do that more often than men do. And so I think that contributes to why you see men having more of these prolonged issues that they aren't getting treatment for than women. And I
Using
think
it. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add one quick thought is that I think with alcohol abuse, women are you generally, in terms of treatment, see more men than women, I think, because women almost experience more shame around forming an addictive pattern with alcohol than men do. Because I think women face more stigma because they are encouraged to be more open about how they're feeling. And I think, generally speaking, alcoholism is seen as sort of a men's issue more so than it is seen as a women's issue. And so women might, you know, kind of face more stigma and might experience more shame than men do for having that issue.
And so I guess with that in mind, when seeking help, is there anything that you would recommend for them to do differently? I guess I'm thinking, you know, of the support piece. I don't know if there's anything that's slightly different for men or women that people should be aware of.
Um, I think in terms of support, it can be helpful to find maybe a group that because they do have specific men's support recovery groups and specific women's support recovery groups. And I think the same is true at a professional level, where you could almost find a inpatient program for men and an inpatient program for women.
Mm.
I think they are, um, there do exist certain groups that try to focus more on people who are gender neutral or transgender. I think they are trying to accommodate those communities at that level as well. But I think incorporating some sort of gender component into treatment, where you could find a men's group or a women's group, um, tends to help an individual just to feel more comfortable expressing or addressing certain issues that one might feel less comfortable sharing in a mixed setting.
Right, right. Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, since we are talking about support, I would like to bring that up because I do think that's an important piece of the puzzle, regardless of whether you're kind of taking a short-term break or a longer-term break. Um, I think there's different ways for us to help ourselves, set ourselves up for success. I know that at the beginning of 2020, I had personally used an app called Less, and it was super simple. It was literally just you would input the amount of drinks that you had, and then you could view stats over time. And depending on why you're taking the break, you might want to use a different app or different resources. Maybe you're doing it to save money, or maybe you're doing it because you truly just want to moderate, but then you might want to cut it out. So, um, are there any apps, resources, or groups that you would particularly recommend for the whole spectrum? I guess I should say, some people, again, are taking a short-term break. Some people are trying to make more of a commitment to it.
Yeah, I think I would start by just saying I think there are resources that exist to support people and goals across the spectrum. So
Yeah.
that's someone who's trying to totally cut out alcohol from their lives. I am familiar with an app called I Am Sober. That's, the goal is to help you to remain sober. It's a way that you can kind of go in and just talk about how you're feeling on a given day, which kind of leads to more awareness of your emotional experience, which I think can be a new skill for a lot of people. And so it kind of helps you practice that, gives you a chance to input just some notes and reflect on what was going on that given day, so you can be more aware of patterns. When if I'm really stressed out at work, that's when I tend to crave a drink more often. Or if I just interacted, we had the holidays come up recently, I interact with some of my family members, that leaves me feeling very depressed, and that's when I really want to drink. It can help you just build some awareness of those patterns. It's the app that I used when I got sober 3 years ago, so I put a little plug in for it there. Um, a helpful, most of my work, I help people be abstinent, so I'm more familiar with resources there. But
Sure.
I do know that there are other, um, in my private work, I do help people who want to moderate, so I'm kind of comfortable with that too. But Sober Grid is another app that I've encouraged people to use, just because it can help put you in touch with people who are trying to stay abstinent in your area.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows for messaging. Let's say that you're home alone on a Saturday night and feeling really down, really wanting a drink because that was when you used to drink. It'd be an opportunity for you to message someone in your area just about how you're feeling. And I do know I've worked with a number of people who've had uh, a positive experience and were able to receive support in situations like those that can be very triggering and can lead to potential relapse. There are a number of books that are out there for how to moderate your drinking, and they give you kind of some rules consistent with the recommendations of the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. So they have helpful hints like limit your drinking to one drink per hour, and they kind of encourage you to start getting in the practice of planning out your drinking over the week. So
Right.
these are the days that I want to drink, and this is how many drinks I'm going for on that day. Kind of keeping some of those structural limits in mind. Um, I think that was 7 weeks to Bring Down Your Drinking is a book that I've helped some of my clients with, just as a guide. Kind of gives you some structure to work around. And like I said, it encourages you to plan. It also helps you to reflect on how successful you were. So it encourages you to, again, write down how you're feeling, kind of recognize the connections between how you're feeling in a given moment and your behavior, so you can make informed decisions going forward, which is what I think we're all trying to do here.
Yeah, I think you bring up two really important pieces of the puzzle, which are you've mentioned the word reflections, but like specifically documenting maybe the feelings and the things that come up as you get triggered, right? And then the other piece is what to do when you get triggered. So normally, if you would drink, like what can you do instead? And I think that the like community that you mentioned and just having that extra support is going to be really helpful for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having other people that it's probably the biggest thing that I encourage anyone that I'm working with is just to have someone in your life that you're talking to this stuff about. So it could be
Yeah.
a family member, a friend, or a loved one, or in some cases, we don't feel comfortable talking to anybody in our personal lives about this, in which case, we might have to reach out and build some new relationships. But just having conversations about drinking behavior, I think, can do a lot to make this stuff more conscious, to build
Mm.
your awareness around. And going through a process like this and sharing what it's like for you with somebody else, you might be surprised by how similar your experience is to that person, if that makes sense. I think I could have
Yeah.
put that better, but it's a good way to know that you're not the only one having these thoughts, and you're not the only one going through this or worrying about this, that there are other people out there, and that can go a long way to letting you know that you're not crazy and you're not alone. And people tend to do better and be more successful when they know those things.
100%. Yes. I tend to tell people you're not alone in this challenge. Like, what are the chances of you as an individual being the only human being that has, this particular challenge? But it goes back to being able to be brave and, acknowledge it and talk about it. But certainly it's easier to talk about with other people, your peers that are having similar experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Zach. Those are the only questions I had for you. I appreciate all your insights. Do you have any other kind of final words or thoughts to leave us with?
I would just say that, like I said before, I think there are resources available for people who want to attempt the full sobriety, or people want to moderate their drinking. There is help out there. I have worked with many people who've found a lot of benefit and been very successful in their efforts to both moderate their drinking and to stop drinking altogether and kind of maintain an abstinent lifestyle. So it can be done. And I would encourage anybody who's thinking about it um, to find somebody else to go through this process with. Sometimes that could even mean getting professional treatment, going to an outpatient program. Because in my experience, this can be done alone, but it can be a very discouraging process. And the people, I think, who find community and go through this with other people, they tend to feel more comfortable as they go through it. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would share, in addition to just the idea that you probably don't know how good you're going to feel in a few months down the road. And so just stick with it, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about. I know that, I guess, in my personal experience, I had thought about my own relationship with drinking as an experiment. So, like to make it less scary, I was like, what if I just test out different things that might work for me? And yeah, along my personal journey, I've had therapists, coaches, different people that were kind of key at different times. So just don't be afraid to ask for help and reach
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. And I like the idea of what you said about it being an experiment. I think that's great.
Yeah. So if people want to reach you, where can they find you? And, do you work with folks virtually or just in the DC area?
Right now, I am working with pretty much everybody virtually.
Mm.
So I'm licensed in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I am working virtually with people in all those states for teletherapy. And then I do meet with some people who are local in person who have said that they haven't gotten the same benefit. So I am available to do that. You can find me at my page on Psychology Today or on Good Therapy. You can just search for my name. It's Zachary Pyne. And then I can be reached at zjplpc@gmail.com is my email, and my work phone number is 443-281-9536. So you can contact me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Excellent. And also in the notes, I'll put your contact information there as well. And of course, I'm Carolina Wellness. I'm always available to answer specific questions or get you in touch with Zach or any other help that you may need. So thanks again for your time and take care, Zach.
Thank you so much, Carolina. I
Have a
really
good one.
appreciate the opportunity.